Last night, big vote on the Senate financial stimulus bill, and Bernie Sanders was making sort of a last stand to stop some who were trying to strip out the additional money that would be going in unemployment checks to those who have lost their jobs as a result of this crisis. He vowed to hold up the stimulus legislation with a demand for stronger conditions on the bill's corporate welfare fund if the Republican senators refuse to drop their objections to the unemployment provisions. And we want to show you just a little bit of some of what he was saying in his address to the senators. Some good stuff here. So here's the first bit.
The other thing that this bill does, which is right, is it says, okay, we are in the midst of a horrific crisis, unprecedented in modern American history. So not only are you going to get your regular unemployment benefits, we're going to add another $600 a week to it. And now I find that some of my Republican colleagues are very distressed. They're very upset that somebody who's making $10, $12 an hour might end up with a paycheck for 4 months more than they received last week. Oh my God, the universe is collapsing. Imagine that. Somebody who's making $12 an hour now, like the rest of us, faces an unprecedented economic crisis with the $600 on top of their regular unemployment check, might be making a few bucks more for 4 months. Oh my word, will the universe survive? How absurd and wrong is that? What kind of value system is that? Meanwhile, these very same folks had no problem a couple of years ago voting for $1 trillion in tax breaks for billionaires and large profitable corporations. Not a problem.
So you saw their comparison to how willing they were willing just a couple of years ago they were to give trillions of dollars away. Not to mention that we're in the middle of potentially the biggest single financial bill / stimulus / whatever. But they have one problem, and that's with the idea that people might temporarily make a little bit more money as they're hunkered down, worried about their lives and the lives of their family. Michael, what did you think about some of the back and forth that you've been following in this Senate process?
Yeah, I thought it was a terrible look from Ben Sass and Tim Scott and Rick Scott and Lindsey Graham to be out there taking this bill apart on that issue. If you're going to take it apart on some issues, that it went too far, that it goes too long, that the amounts were too high in general, but on the notion, the implied notion that people in Tim Scott's state of South Carolina are going to try and go on unemployment and not go back to work because they would make a little bit more. That's just an insult to America. And the way that that was processed by these 4 senators as an outrage, at least was set aside because they didn't have very much support over it. It was also something that had been hammered out with the White House and the Senate leadership, so it wasn't going to go anywhere anyway. And it did give Sanders a great opportunity to talk about the things that he talks about best. And I think that he's an important senator in that regard, just to keep people real, as it were, about that.
Let's go to just a bit more of what Bernie had to say, and here he's talking specifically about how originally, before the extra 600 was added in, there were going to be stimulus checks, but that they were going to be sort of scaled down for people who already had less money.
But when it comes to low-income workers in the midst of a terrible crisis, maybe some of them earning or having more money than they previously made. Oh my word, we got to strip that out. Got to tell those poor people that no matter what. By the way, when the McConnell bill first came up, unbelievably, and I know many Republicans objected to this, they were saying that, well, we want to give whatever it was, $1,000 or $1,200, but poor people should get less. You see, because poor people are down here, they don't deserve, they don't eat, they don't pay rent, they don't go to the doctor, they're somehow inferior because they're poor, we're going to give them less. Well, that was addressed. Now everybody is going to get the $1,200. But some of my Republican friends still have not given up on the need to punish the poor and working people. You haven't raised the minimum wage in 10 years. Minimum wage should be at least $15 an hour. You haven't done that. You've cut program after program after program, and now, horror of horrors, for 4 months, workers might be earning a few bucks more than they otherwise went. Well, needless to say, this is an amendment that is coming up. I don't think it's going to go very far. And if it does go far, I will introduce an amendment to deal with the corporate welfare, the $500 billion in corporate welfare, which is, to me, a very serious problem. But I do not think they're going to get the 60 votes, and that will be the end of it.
So, look, Michael, I think ideally he could have stopped them from blocking the unemployment, and also that something substantive could be done to provide additional safeguards over that gigantic slush fund, which they're saying is $500 billion, but there's a lot of reason to believe that in the end it's going to represent far more money. I guess it is certainly a win for him, both in terms of substance, but also in terms of optics. And to have the Republican Party, the stand that some of them wanted to make was poor people are making out too good in this pandemic. That seems like a weird choice.
It's a bad political choice to have made. And, one of the other things to remember, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand yesterday called this first bill triage, right? This is where you take the patient right away when they get to the hospital. This is the triage bill, and there are going to be bills that follow. But one of the important parts of this is, and I think perspective is important too, is that this was a $2 trillion bill. An annual appropriations budget is between 1.2 and 4 trillion a year, and they take months to put those bills together. This bill was cobbled together in days, which is pretty extraordinary when you listen to the fact that you have Bernie Sanders and Tim Scott on virtual, polar opposites of the spectrum there, that everyone was able to come together and get something. So I think that a lot of I spoke to a couple of Democratic staffers yesterday, no senators, but Democratic staffers who said, look, they didn't care what they had to give away as long as they were able to cover the people they were able to cover, and they did so to some margin. And of course, they didn't care at all, but they were willing to give up a lot in corporate to get as much as they could for working Americans.
Yeah, and I feel like, my God, when we finally check in 6 months or in a year, 5 years, we look at the long term, what was done with this fund, I think it is going to be a gigantic debacle. Like the idea that Steve Mnuchin, a guy that we're going to turn to shortly, that he's the one who, at least for the near future, is going to have supreme authority in terms of doling that out, and that some, Senate panel he might have to go and speak to briefly if he waives any of the protections that are baked into the bill. I know that all that was designed to make us a little bit less worried about what's going to be done with this huge sum of money, this unprecedented sum of money. But I feel like it's at best minimal safeguards, and I don't trust any of the people that are going to be responsible for this money.
Well, they do say there's going to be an inspector general, and those inspector generals, as a country, we have come to, for better or worse, trust them in these sorts of sort of oversight ways. That's the system we have in place, whether we like it or not. And it's probably better than Mnuchin, probably better than some of the people in the administration. We look back, the same arguments were being made in the bailout, not of the banks, but of the auto companies as well. And that people said, oh, this was, why not just let them, you remember Mitt Romney may have lost an election by saying, let Detroit die, right? And so we as a country chose not to do that. We look back with great criticism of the way some of it was handled, but on balance, we saved the automobile industry, and that was important. So if this has any of that, but I do agree there's a great deal of skepticism, also skepticism because of who the president is and who the administration is. And, the leadership is the leadership, but I do think that there are at least checks on the leadership. There don't seem to be within the administration.
For more political news, breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.